Everybody, welcome back to the Iron Purpose podcast. It was recommended to me by one of my former guests. She said this person is very awesome. He's got a lot of knowledge and a pretty cool story. You got to get him on. And I was like, all right, let's make it happen. Matt Nagel, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing today, man?
Hey, man. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for those who don't know who you are, maybe just give a brief, just a hey, this is who I am. This is what I do.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Matt. I'm married to Lisa, 20 years. The summer here, we have 6 kids at home, and I serve as a pastor in the Brainerd Lakes area at a church called Lakewood Evangelical Free Church.
Love that. So busy guy with 6 kids, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot of fun.
I love that. Yeah, it was like I was talking to beforehand. Courtney and I, my wife, just had our first son, first kid, Caden, and we're about 4 months in. I think tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow will be 4 months in. And God bless you for having six.
No, listen. I mean, every number is a joy, and it
Mm,
brings its own difficulty. Lisa and I was 21 when we had our first child, and I don't remember it being easy. So
yeah.
it's an adjustment period, and enjoy it. One of my I always say this to young dads. One of my biggest regrets as a young father was trying to figure out everything in the immediate, trying to have my whole life figured out, and having some of that young impatient dad syndrome,
Mm,
and just struggled to enjoy small kids. So
hmm.
have fun, man. It's a real gift.
It really is, and I'm glad you pointed that out because there are times where, like today, for instance, I tried to lay him down for a nap, and he just like grunted and made all these noises, and we're trying to just lay him down and not rock him right now just to get him ready for daycare when he has to go because we're probably not going to be able to rock him to sleep every single time. But and he just cried and cried. We went on for probably like 2 hours, and I was just like breathing through it, and then I had to like catch myself like, yeah, this is frustrating, this isn't the funnest for me, but when I think of it from his perspective, like looking back at the day, like, oh, this is what we did. My dad held me while I cried myself to sleep, and he changed my diaper. I got to spend the whole day with my dad. Like one of my friends shared that with me. So like having that perspective makes you go, okay, I can enjoy even these little moments, even if there's a little bit of adjusting to do. There's still beauty within it.
Well, even staying in your own perspective, we just had a grad party for my oldest daughter and graduating high school, going to college. She's leaving the home. She's an adult. And, there's some grief that comes with, oh, those things that I thought were inconveniences when they were little, you realize they weren't. They were sweet gifts. And I wish I didn't look past them so quickly as I did when I was younger. Yeah. Anyway, congrats, man. That's
I
awesome.
love that. Thank you, and I appreciate that perspective. So with it's hard to believe it's already July. What you been up to lately, other than working with the church and family? You got any other big plans going on?
No, always trying to solve the world. I mean, just in the dynamics of this is like a human experience, the dynamics of uh, a husband, father, vocational life. We have jobs, and there's always things that you're trying to navigate and figure out. And so, like I mentioned, my oldest daughter graduated in high school. That's been a big transition point for family life. I'm coaching my oldest son's baseball team this year, and I didn't know I was a coach. I offered to help when I show up, and I'm the head coach, and totally happy to do it. Well, okay, one quick funny story. I'll try
Please,
not to do this a ton.
I love it.
So first practice, there's all these 10, 11-year olds, and I'm giving them a little pep talk, and when you're 10 or 11, you just look up to the coach and like they know everything, and they don't know. Like I'm just making it up on the spot. So I'm giving them this little pep talk about, both in baseball and in life, it's not the brilliant who thrive, it's the diligent. So I keep telling the boys, if you would be diligent in baseball and in life, you will see success in all areas. And so I'm giving this little pep talk, and I throw the jerseys out on the infield because they're going to pick out their jerseys the first practice. And I didn't realize that when I had brought the jerseys home, I put them on the couch, clean laundry underneath. Maybe you see where the story's going. I throw the jerseys out a day later on the field, and I look down, and there's a pair of my underwear. And what a great introduction to the coach. And so I hold it up and make a little joke about it. And I come home that night, and my wife says, "You're so lucky they were yours." Because could you imagine, Matt, if you weren't the coach, your son comes home from his first practice and says, "Oh yeah, practice went great. Weird thing, coach threw women's underwear on the field." I mean, you would have pulled him off the team.
Right, probably.
I was saved from scandal. It was mine and no one else's. So
That's amazing.
Graduation, baseball, work stuff. Whenever you're in, I don't know if it's, we'll probably talk about this later. Whenever you're involved in a ministry, you're intimately involved in people's lives. So it goes far beyond the experience of an hour service on a Sunday, but how do you disciple and love and care, and funerals that we're in the process of overseeing, marriage counseling, and so life is full, but it's sweet as well.
Love that.
Yeah,
That's a crazy perspective. I think of my buddy Dan Newton. He is a assistant pastor at Faith Baptist.
I know
We
Dan.
just got a chance. Yeah, great guy. We just got a chance to go up to the Boundary Waters and hang out. And another one of my friends, and then my cousin. So it was the four of us up there. And we kind of got talking about ministry and how it is for him. And that was one thing that I hadn't thought of was funerals. That's also something that you guys have to do as a church and put those on.
Yep. Well, it's a way to serve families well in a
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable moment, and I love Dan. I've attended their church a couple times,
Oh,
and
goodness.
I
Okay.
think the world of him and Chloe, and fun
Beautiful
connection.
family. Yeah, I've known him for a long time, but yeah, that's cool. Well, you kind of talked about a little bit about your life, and it's definitely some things we'll get into, like you mentioned. But now, I guess I'll just open the mic to you to kind of just tell your story. Like I said, as far back as you want to where you are now, kind of just the hills and valleys, and then I'll just kind of I have a notepad here, so if you see me looking down, I'm just writing my notes
Okay.
of questions that I want to ask you and whatnot. But take it away, man.
Yeah, that's so hard. Anytime you have an opportunity to tell a story, a testimony of your life and how God's worked in the midst of it. I mean, there's so many details, and where do you begin? But for me, I think a lot of it starts for me in high school. Uh, I grew up in a home that would be atheistic, agnostic, and grew up with a single mom. We moved a dozen times in a matter of just years. I went to high school up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and in my high school years, firmly atheistic, agnostic. So there is no God, but I don't know for sure, and you don't know either. And that began to turn and shift a little bit as an adult, because life's hard, and you enter into adulting, and there's things that you're confronted by way of circumstance and relationship, and God uses those things in God's kindness. I had a pretty reflective posture, just temperamentally, which can be a great weakness because I'm inside my head all the time too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 19 years old, I met my future wife. And Lisa grew up in a Christian family, but when I met her, she wasn't a Christian. I kind of played the part externally, maybe had an experience of some of the people that you referenced, even some of the conversation before we hit record here, of those who grow up with a certain kind of faith tradition or in the midst of a certain culture. And then as they become adults, they say, you know what, that's not me. And that was my wife's story. And so I meet Lisa and we start dating, and her parents had concerns about that, and I would too. I was 19 years old, pretty raw and rough around the edges, still am in some ways. And Lisa, just great parents, great family life, very godly. Expressed concern with Lisa that she would date someone like me because in many ways they were more insightful than she was. I wasn't a great person in many regards. So I said, "Hey, don't worry, girlfriend, don't worry, Lisa. I'll invite your parents over to my apartment. I'll make them dinner. They'll see what a great guy I am, and it'll be good." And at that period of my life, I was a liar and a manipulator. So I could massage relationships, or I thought that I could massage relationships in such a way where I'll win you over. I'll convince you. So Lisa's parents come over. I make them some chicken stir fry crap out of a frozen bag, and I mean it was terrible. And they sat there across from the table and they ate, and I have this laundry list of reasons why I should be able to date their daughter, and I'm a decent person and morally, and compared to other people out there. I never got a chance to pull that list out, but rather they started asking me questions about God, and I said, okay, here we go. These kinds of religious folk. asking me questions about God. I was more agnostic in that moment, and I wanted to date their daughter. So it's like, well, God might exist. No one can know him. Jesus isn't someone that matters or has any kind of real implication on my life or yours. And they received it. And, it's interesting as a father of four daughters now. And they're about to be four teenage daughters, by the way. So I'm just in a season
God
that,
bless you, sir.
and as a daughter, as a father of four daughters, I don't know if I would have responded the way they did, because they're sitting across from a young man who thinks radically different than they do in every regard. And my first instinct would be, you are never gonna be near my daughter or see her at all.
Mm-hmm.
You don't meet the requirement. In fact, here's my gun. This is where I've been cleaning it, and I'll go back to prison if I have to. Or like, these big boasts of warning. And what they did was radically different, and I would argue very Christ-like. They said, "Hey, would you like to come to church with us and just see what happens?" And I still don't know how that was their response. So they leave. Lisa and I are there in my apartment. We're high-fiving each other. We tricked them. Maybe we didn't express it like that, but we said, "Hey, we jumped through some hoops, and at this point, they've signed off. We can keep dating, being together, and we'll see where it goes."
If you don't mind me asking, at
But
that point, did your wife or your then girlfriend have a similar view to you? Or was she kind of like hoping you'd kind of hop the fence over to what she believed? Or was she kind of
no,
just
yeah,
in.
she was not a Christian in the least. So hated Christ, hated the church, hated especially the form and the brand of Christianity, the culture of it that she was raised in. Maybe a little more fundamental. And yeah, so she wouldn't have been atheistic, but more of a deist, probably. More of, hey, there's God up there, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did this crazy thing. I say, well, hey, to appease your parents, we'll show up. And and I mean, no one knew at the time. We're making plans like, hey, should we move to California together? Like we're playing marriage and scheming of a life together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go to this small Baptist church in Prior Lake, Minnesota, and Lisa's late. So I get, the first time I show up, I'm a young person showing up at a church. They're all excited. Here's this young man. Let me take you to where the other young people are. And I'm sitting in a circle. All of a sudden, I find myself, my first Sunday there, sitting in a circle of young people with an older guy leading it. And they're going around sharing prayer requests and praying. And he turns to me and he goes, "Would you be willing to pray?" And I go, he explains what the prayer request is. I had no idea what he was saying. So it comes around, and I'm this like agnostic atheist guy. First time in a church, and I had been in a church before, but first time in a few years maybe. It comes to me, and I don't remember what I said, but clearly I said it wrong, because I remember opening my eyes and everyone is staring at me. I'm going, whew. I mean, this is what an experience. Lisa comes in. I'm so sorry. Da, da, da. Through the pain of that and the awkwardness of that, I started showing up periodically to this church. The music was, to the standards of many young people, boring, confusing. A lot of Christianese I didn't understand. The sermons themselves, the pastor was an older guy, a little bit of a storyteller. So, I'm trying to connect things to what he's saying. But fundamentally, what happened when I was 20 years old, the Lord used those imperfect situations and people to help me to really focus on and contemplate on two things I knew empirically. Number one, I'm not a great person. Now I could compare myself morally to others and say, well, I got a leg up on that guy, a leg up on that person. I'm not a murderer, but I knew, even as a non-Christian, the depraved nature of how I thought, how I spoke, my true motivations and intentions, and in addition, there was a healthy dissatisfaction in my life at the time that said, sex, money, prospect of career, plans. Like, I mean, this isn't really doing anything. So it really was a simple question where it's, Lord, I'm not interested in drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't want to be manipulated. I don't want to be tricked, but I need to know if you're real. And if you are, then that has implications. So early in 2005, God graciously, I'm going to disappoint you, and I'll disappoint any of your watchers that are maybe atheistic or agnostic. There was no brilliant scientific, intellectual, philosophical thought or idea that shifted me. In many ways, it really was a moral one. And I knew my need. And then what I'm hearing is the prospect of I'm needy, and what's being communicated is the gift of someone who would meet my need. If I grab my keys and jingle the keys, you're not going to be excited hearing that. But you would if you were locked in a dungeon.
Mm.
And so it's often against the backdrop of blackness that we see light. It's 4:45 right now. We're looking outside. You can't see those stars. You only see the stars against the backdrop of darkness. And so it is with Christianity. The brightness and the beauty of Christ is not appealing unless it's against the backdrop of sin, brokenness, need. At 20 years old, God was really kind to bring me to a needy, broken position. And by way of comparison to others, I wasn't that bad off. But I needed something to be rectified, and I wasn't willing to push it aside.
Mm.
So Jesus looked precious and beautiful, and I trusted in him. A simple, childlike faith, and two things happened immediately. Number one, there was a recalibration in how I thought and spoke. I had some pretty loose lips, and not simply by way of being flagrant and vulgar or anything like that, but very quick and a great exaggerator and a
Mm-hmm.
great liar. And my then girlfriend saw some immediate change in that, where I was sensitive to not only lie, but even the slightest exaggeration. Correct. There was like an immediate conviction. And for those who aren't religious, it's like, well, okay, you're just being a more moral person. But it wasn't something that I was actively choosing, but it was rather the fruit of something that had happened in me. And the second thing I noticed was just a tangible difference in my desires. You can't make yourself want something. And I desired new things. I desired to know, God, if you're real, if you've spoken clearly in your word, that there's all of a sudden this desire to seek that, whereas before there wasn't. There was a desire even to be around other religious Christian-like people, recognizing in me a desire to be in community. I know that's something I've checked out some of your podcasts, some that you've talked about. That's a new desire, and for someone who's very introverted naturally, I'm a sneaky introvert. The desire for community and fellowship amongst God's people was a new thing. So I share some of Lisa's story leading up to it because our stories are intimately connected. We were working together overnights at a place, and we finished our overnight shift, and we're in my car. We're going to go get coffee, as we often did. And I turned to her and I said, Lisa, I've become a Christian. And she bawled her eyes out. She was so upset because here she is trying to run away from a family, a culture, of religion where she was dissatisfied. And then in her own mind, she shares now afterwards, she was angry at not just at me, but at God, saying, "Of course, God, of course, I would try to run away, and then you would take the one man who has no family influence towards this, no prior conditioning towards Christianity, but in an Emmaus kind of roadway, you open his minds. There's a warmth, and his affections are changed, and he's turned to Christ. Of course, you would do this, God. You're just trying to ruin my life." And it was a few months after that that Lisa took that providence of God's work in me as a signal that she herself needed to consider. She refers, it's an old tradition to refer to God as the hound of heaven. And she said, the hound of heaven was after me. God used the conversion of my boyfriend, she says, to show me the beauty of Christ, because she had never witnessed someone genuinely converted.
Mm.
So after that, we said, hey, we've been playing marriage. Maybe we should get married. And so it wasn't long after that I proposed. A few months after that, we got married, and we lived happily ever after. And so I mean, so how do you explain the next 20 years? Yeah, I worked in the trades as an electrician. Like to use my hands, enjoy it. I both my parents are just blue collar workers, and then a couple years into marriage, God gave me just a healthy dissatisfaction for my life. Married, a kid, had a truck, I had a sweet job that I liked, and I felt like I was getting better at. And I said, I think God wants something different. So I quit my job and went to Bible college. And it had zero desire for ministry, but it really was, again, as a young Christian saying, I want to be a better father. I want to be a better husband. I don't have good categories for that. Never been discipled. So I go to Bible college. And it was there that the Lord just gradually gave me a desire to serve in ministry.
Yeah.
That's a story of the Lord's gracious changing of me. And then certainly from there, the next 20 years, the trajectory was radically changed.
Yeah. Wow. So when you made the decision to go into Bible college, like you said, you weren't planning on becoming a pastor or working in the ministry. You just wanted to go get poured into so that you could learn to be better for the people around you. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's a sense in like as a Christian, if I say I'm a Christian, and here's a generational thing that I think we're more sensitive to than maybe those of the past. It's if I really am going to be a Christ follower, then I should probably know who he is, what he said, what's required, I mean, what the Christian life actually looks like. Certainly there was nothing in me, and again, this is why I say maybe it's a little generational. We can be a little all or nothing. There was nothing in me that I was content being a cultural Christian. It was, well, I mean, if I really believe that God's real, then I want to invest at least part of my life to know him. And that has implications on family and all that.
Right. Awesome. So going back to the beginning when you ended up going to that church for that first time, what, especially with the first experience kind of being a little rough, sounds like, what was it that brought you back the second time? Was it to, well, all right, well, we'll still appease your parents and I'll come back, or was it genuinely that first time, that first experience there kind of hooked you in and got you more intrigued?
No, yeah, definitely was not hooked and intrigued. The Christian message was stupid. And it didn't help that being a little judgy and coming in and being like, oh, okay, everyone's dressed all pretty and they're carrying their Bible and there's a certain way that they talk, that kind of that Christianese that church people kind of know. Yeah, no, certainly wasn't hooked. But I will say, and this is true, I recognize this even as a teenager in my high school years. I really did have a genuine interest in people. I was kind and I liked talking to people and showing real interest to people. And I'd gone to church a couple times in high school. Again, not really seeking anything, not really believing any of it, but wanting to connect to the people I was going with, whether it be a girlfriend or a family or a friend. I was a decent person. So um, I think I was able to operate in those spaces pretty comfortably. Like, hey, I'm a nice guy. I'm willing to hear you out. But yeah, there was nothing in that first experience that was like, oh yeah, this is really compelling.
Well, it's interesting that you have that perspective now, being a pastor. Do you see a lot of people coming into your church and see yourself in that person? That first time going into the church, going, "This is dumb. What am I doing here?" And does that experience that you had kind of help assist you in that? Going, what can I do to make sure that I am not what I thought other people were?
Do I see myself in other people? Sure. Yeah. I mean, believing, dry spiritually, maybe. And at the same time, I look back on that the experience I've had with any Christian, growing up in high school, in my early adult years, none of them really stand out as amazing. And what I mean by that is we don't have to be someone we're not. God uses imperfect, inconsistent, flawed Christians to imperfectly live and communicate a message of Christ. And skeptics like me, and we can point at all the deficiencies of a church or a culture or a pastor or a message. But at the end of the day, that's what God uses. So yeah, there's people that are going to come into my church and they're not going to like everything they see and everything they hear, but that's okay because God
Mm,
uses imperfect things to accomplish the mission of drawing hearts and souls.
wow, that was a great answer. I can literally feel like a almost like a comfort, or almost like a weight off of my shoulders too. Just being in the
You're
field that I
not a
work
big deal, man.
into.
Yeah, I mean, listen, right?
I love that.
I mean, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a podcaster, listen, man, the benefit of God using this and using your life isn't going to be based on your eloquence and your, pristine ability to meet the needs of every single person you meet.
Mm.
And so, God calls us to be faithful. He doesn't call us to be perfect. Yeah, we want to strive to be all things to all people as we can. But at the end of the day, like this is who I am. I'm seeking to be changed by the Spirit and being more like Christ, and I'm just going to go for it. And I think we need to do that and that's what people did with me. No one tried to be who they weren't. I look back at Lisa's parents, and I just talked to Lisa's dad a couple hours ago on the phone, and like that dude didn't try to be someone he wasn't. And there's things I could point at and laugh about him, and like that's who God uses. So
I think of like my experiences working in the jail, and there's a lot of times there's pressure. Like this person, they're at the end of the rope, they're at that rock bottom. How can I help assist them? As a not only a correctional officer, but as a man of God, as somebody who has faith and has relied on that to get me through some tough times in my life. Like, how can I spread that to them or that hope to them? And a lot of times, there are guys that do accept it, they take it, and they go, "Man, that's really good stuff." And you can see like a change within their life while they're in jail, like a perspective shift. And then there's the guys that say, "You know what, screw you, man." And there have been times where it's difficult to manage that. I think the important thing is kind of like you said is God's going to use you. You're not going to be perfect, and it's the effort that we put in.
well, and I'd say even when the effort's not there, it's the obedience that's put in, because sometimes my
Mm.
effort's really not what it should be. We plant, we water. Who brings increase? Who brings growth? It's not us. So in the setting that you're in, I worked at a rescue mission with drug addicts and homeless men when I lived in downtown Louisville for a season. Louisville, not Louisville. Louisville. I say like the locals, and it was the same thing. I have men heroin addicts puking blood in my office,
Mm.
and I'm trying to how do I meet them? And I can't. I can't. All I can do is to be faithful, obey, speak words of life and encouragement, and ask God to use that. And I think um, that's really freeing. Think about it as a new dad. You're not going to be all things to that kid, but your faithfulness as a father, just say, "Hey, Lord, I'm going to try to be faithful as a dad here, and will you fill in the gaps where I make all my mistakes?" And will you use my humble attempts to produce good fruit? And it takes a lot of pressure off of us and allows us to, I think, just be more readily obedient to serve others around us.
That's exactly where I was about to go next because your wife's experience, she grew up with that Christian family, and her parents probably were maybe thinking that they were doing the right things and sharing God, and she just wanted nothing to do with that. And my next question to you was: is that ever crossing your mind as you're raising your kids, wondering if are we doing the right things? Are they receiving what we're trying to share with them? But then you kind of answer that question.
Well, I mean, I can elaborate a little bit more and just say,
Please.
certainly, as parents, I don't think this is going to be a popular thing I'm about to say here. Certainly, some, not all, in part, some of our leadership, whether it's in marriage, as parents, in vocational settings, in life, out in the world, some of the failure of others to follow is on us. So if my kids grow up and they're terrible human beings, some of that, not all, they're their own people, they're accountable for their own decisions, that's all true. But certainly I can look back and say, I didn't do everything right. And there's just a humility in leadership in life that says, I can't totally put all the blame on them. I'm called to be faithful, and if they have erred, I can. There's no way I can't look back and see some of the ways in which I could have better contributed to their success. But again, that's putting a lot of pressure on parents. So let me take the pressure off. It's this weird tension, right? Taking the pressure off ultimately says, yes, I desire my kids to surpass me in life and faith and success and all of those things, but I can't manufacture it. So Lisa's parents did do a lot of great things, and they did a lot of things terrible. And same with my parents. Um, my spiritual life and the spiritual life of my wife is not dependent upon the success of the parenting that came before. Certainly, it affects it, influences it, of course. But we have two very different childhoods. And here we are today in 2025. We are both seeking to be faithful followers of Christ because the Spirit of God has moved in us and done a work, despite a Christian household and an agnostic, atheistic household. So God is a lot bigger. So that's taking the pressure off. God is so much bigger than our imperfect attempts to serve our children well. So there's both end. It's I want to be diligent and faithful because that affects and the trajectory of my kid's life. And at the same time, God, you are so big, even even despite myself, the wind will blow, and you will. I trust that you will work in my kid's life.
And it made me think of a story. There was a guy who was at the jail and he had just got sentenced to prison, and or he was kind of going back and forth. He wasn't sure quite yet if he was going to go to prison or if he was going to get a chance to go back to treatment. And he was like, Bailey, how do I pray about this? And he and I would have some conversations. As a correctional officer representing Crow County, I wasn't going in there saying, God, this and that. It was more of I go in there, hey, man to man here, you can tell me to leave right now and I'll walk out. And he's like, no, yeah, let's talk about it. So he's like, what do I pray for? Maybe God wants me to go to prison. Maybe that's where I'm supposed to be. Maybe there's a lot of people there that need to hear what I have to say or what God has in my life. And he's like, but I at the same time, like, I don't want to go there. How hard should I fight to not go when maybe that's God's calling for my life? And we went back and forth trying to figure it out. And I was online and looking at verses, and we came to a point where we had all our compiled notes and knowledge. And I don't know exactly where these verses are at, but one of them was essentially God fights my battles, or I will fight for you. You only need to be still, something along those lines. So it's like, okay, God fights my battles. Although there's also a verse that it's along the lines of God prepares my hands for war and my fingers for battle, and something like that. So now it's so God prepares my hands for battle and my fingers for war, or vice versa. And now he's saying you don't need to fight; you just need to be still, and I'm going to fight your battles. So we were like, well, which one is it? And he and I were both talking, and we kind of we got brought to the analogy of the farmer, and you even touched on this a little bit. Of a farmer doesn't sit there and pray, all right, I hope the corn grows, and he also doesn't just throw out the corn and then expect it to just grow. Like, he's gonna go out there and he's gonna do the work. He's gonna get the sweat on his brow and he's gonna get dirty with the ground, putting the plant and the seed. But the part of it is like he can't predict the harvest. Like, that's in God's hands. God's gonna produce the water, the rain. He's going to keep those birds away, or the certain birds to keep the bugs out, or whatever it is. And he's just got to be that farmer to put in that work. So he was like, all right, well, I'm gonna, I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna expect to use whatever situation God has for me. That's my harvest. It's gonna be whatever the outcome is. That's the harvest for me, and I'm gonna do whatever God wants me to do in that season. But he's like, but I'm also gonna make the most of right now, and I'm gonna try to fight for my case and not have to go, so I could be used somewhere else. And he had a lot of comfort in that, and he ended up having to go do some time in prison. But before he left, he was like, I'm ready for this, because he prepared and planned for it. So it was interesting.
Well, to boil all that down, really what we're kind of circling around is what is the relationship between a big God who directs and controls all things and our moral responsibility to be people of volition and action and obedience. And those two are not in tension. They're both true at the same time. We have a big God who moves and works in mysterious ways, and we are people called to be diligent. Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah, and with the story that I kind of shared about some people in my life that I know who are kind of moving away from the faith, I think some of the bigger things that are drawing them away is, if there is a God, why is he allowing all of these bad things to happen to, good people? Why are people getting murdered? And why is there all this, the wars and the crime and, all of this? Do you think there's a correlation with that and the people that aren't doing that work, kind of like the on the opposite side of it, like the free will that God gives us? It's not God's. Sure, God could prevent something from happening, but he gives each of us a free will to make our own decisions on this world. And unfortunately, people are, there is evil, and people take advantage of that opportunity of free will and, use it to commit crimes or to go to
Sure.
battle. Do
Yeah,
you
I
have
mean
a
that's a good question. And really, it's a question of the character of God. Is God good? Well, I mean, if he's good, why is all this happening? So maybe he's good, but he's not in control. Or turn it around, God's in control, but he's not good because he's allowing all this to happen. So really, I think it's a misunderstanding of God's character. So here's a wet blanket. I mean, it's a measure of comfort, but it might not feel like comfort in the moment. And it's an illustration that's been used a million times by all kinds of people. So I got a window in front of me. So I look out the window, and if you were here with me, I'd say, Bailey, how many elephants do you see? And you'd be able to look out, and very clearly, if there was an elephant, you would be able to see it and say there is one or there isn't. But if we're standing here together and we're looking out this window, and I said, "Hey Bailey, how many gnats, those little no-see-ums, how many of those little bugs are out there?" There's no way for you to discern that. There's no way for you to calculate it. So the application is, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. In the same way, when it comes to the purposes of God and suffering and evil, just because you can't see a reason doesn't mean that there isn't one.
mm,
And truly, if God does exist and there's this ultimate good, powerful being who has made everything, controls everything, sustains everything, wouldn't it be logical that he would understand reasons for evil and suffering where we would not? But in the Lord's kindness, sometimes we do get some clarity. Famously in the Christian tradition, the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis is a great example. Oh man, this poor guy. He's kind of a punk. You look at this coat I got, look how big of a deal. He has all these brothers, and he is kind of elevating himself to his brothers. They throw him in a pit, they strip him, they sell him into slavery. Not good. Sold into slavery, at one point accused for an inappropriate relationship with someone, thrown into prison again, forgotten in prison. A lot of bad stuff happened to this guy. And the story finishes at the end of Genesis, and we see the historical narrative of his life. The dad dies, and the 12 brothers, or rather the 11 brothers who had thrown him, beat him, and just set him on a trajectory of suffering for years and years and years and years. They're worried that now that dad's gone, Joseph's going to take his revenge because he's kind of a big deal now. He's in a position of power. He can do that. And Joseph says something really, really, really interesting. He says, "What you meant for evil, stripping me, beating me, throwing me in a pit," it documents in there that Joseph was screaming and crying for them to get him out. And they sit down and they have lunch.
mm,
And it set up a whole season of suffering and heartache for Joseph. And Joseph says, "What you meant for evil, what you chose for evil, what you intended for harm," doesn't say God used it for good. It says God meant it for good. And Joseph then, in his position, was the one who was able to bring safety to his entire family that he wouldn't have unless he had been set on a trajectory through the evil actions of his brother that led him to be where he was. So in a circumstance like that, hindsight is 2020, and we say, well, Joseph, at a time in his life, he's saying, God, why is there suffering? Why is there evil? Fast forward a couple decades, and he goes, oh, okay, now I see. God, you meant evil and suffering in my life to be used and redeemed in a way where you would work in my heart, work in my brother's heart, and save an entire nation. So we don't have that kind of clarity. Most of us are pretty normal, simple people. We're not going to have books written about us. No one's going to document our life after the fact and the suffering that we've gone through. But again, going back to the illustration, just because you can't see the noceum, the bug, just because you can't see a reason for suffering and evil, it doesn't mean that there's not one. It just means that you're not God. And that's really hard for us because, especially in a Western world, we want to have answers. We want to have answers for everything. And when we don't, we're left to philosophical questions, some scheming as to what may be going on, but we just don't know. And so it comes down to this: do we trust that God is good and in control or not? And that's a soft pillow to rest your head on, because then when circumstance, evil, and suffering does come, you can be assured that God is good. There's a plan for it. And even if you can't see it, He's there with you. One powerful illustration of this is there was a season of our life where we tried to move to the Middle East, and we were going to go as mission. I'm a failed missionary, never made it. We were going to move to the Middle East with some friends and plant a church and raise up national leaders. And our friends made it, and for multiple reasons, whole other podcast, we didn't get there. So one of the families, the wife, in her mid 30s at the time, had an inoperable brain tumor on the front of her head, and she didn't know how long she was going to live. Some people can live a matter of months or decades, depending on treatment. And I remember her standing up at a meeting and sharing with our entire church, I have brain cancer. I'm going to die, and this is God's best plan for my life. Resting her head on the pillow of providence, saying, I trust, even though there's evil and suffering, even though I'm going to die and my 3 kids will lose their mom, I trust that this suffering isn't purposeless, but God is going to use it in my life and in theirs. And apart from a deep trust in the character of God, it's hard to get there. So I totally understand, very sympathetic. I bear scars in my own life and have been around those who have deep wounds of suffering. And evil in the world is a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no easy answer, but that maybe helps some of the conversation.
Absolutely. And, on the flip side of that, too, we'll just touch on this a little bit. I want to get your opinion on it. It's a quote that I heard today. And you said there is evil in the world and bad things are going to happen. And a lot of times that evil can look very appealing and it can kind of mask itself as peace and comfort that you think takes the place of God. And it was a quote that says, "There's always a counterfeit to the true peace that God wants to give you." Do you have any thoughts on that quote? And like, because like the conversation we had before again with this person that I know, they also said that church just kind of got boring and they just really weren't into it anymore. And I think it's a little bit of the world being appealing of, I don't really want to do this. I want to go party. Or I want to go do this and that, and whatever that might look like.
Say the quote again.
There's always a counterfeit to the true peace that God wants to give you.
So here's the Mattism. Here's how I would say it. The things of this world are designed to fail you, because everything that you have in this life, whether it's a marriage, a family, a career, a dollar amount in the bank account, an experience of drugs, sex, good music, whatever it is, all those things are designed to fail you. And the proof in the pudding is we can pursue all of those things, and we know that they become counterfeits when we're placing our hope and our trust that this is going to fill the longing of my heart. And in time, sometimes it takes a lifetime, different seasons. In time, especially as we get older, we come to the realization that those things are counterfeits. Those things do fail us. And this is especially true in relationships. Um, a lot of guys is like, man, if I could just, there's one guy I'm thinking of in particular. if I could just find a companion, my life would be set. Nope. It doesn't. Because it just doesn't work that way. And because maybe I'm the worst person you've ever interviewed, but I'll just make this admission. In 20 years of marriage, there have been times where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be married anymore. I don't want to deal with this. This person has failed me in some way. This person doesn't meet my preference in some way. Even our most healthy relationships, they come up short. And in that sense, they prove to be counterfeits because they're not able to give us a longing. And I think it was C.S. Lewis that said, man, if you can't find anything in this world to satisfy you, it's proof that you were made for another world.
Mm.
So, yep, counterfeits, totally understand it. And just by the way, when I choose sin tomorrow, I don't think there's a day I've gone by without sinning. When I choose sin tomorrow, I'm fundamentally coming to this question: do I really believe God and his ways provide satisfaction? Or if I run to this counterfeit for a second, do I think that's going to give me what God can't? No, I don't know the demographic of your audience, but let's just say typically men. If I give myself to fantasizing about this woman, engaging in pornography, pursuing a specific kind of lifestyle, the boat, I got a 23-year-old truck full of rust, and I'm going, man, you know what? I should just go into debt and do what everyone else does my age and get a really nice F-150. And so there's a sense in which I convictionally I'm left with the choice. I could say, you know what, Lord, I'm going to live within my means and be a responsible steward of the resources you've given me, or I can pursue this counterfeit over here and take and fill what I hope your way doesn't give me. And so, all the healthy appetites. I think it's Proverbs 13:25 says, the belly of the wicked suffers want. They can't get enough. They constantly want more. But the righteous has enough to satisfy his appetite. It's not that they're getting a 5-course meal, but what God has given them is enough. And when it comes to the idea of counterfeits, the question is, Lord, what you've given me by way of, I'll just be honest, like, Lord, how I look, I'm insecure, got a big nose. My mind, Lord, I wish I was smarter. My relationship, God, I wish my wife was just a little more this way. My kids, the cards that have been dealt in my life, do I receive them as, Lord, you know what? This is enough. And when I say it's not, that's when I shift and I look at these counterfeits that give me something for a moment or for a season. But as I said, all things are designed to fail us, and they will.
Puts a lot of things to perspective, man. That the choices that we make, the decisions that we make. It's why are we making those things? Are we not content? Are we not thankful? And I think that's when practicing more gratitude, I think that really has been something I want to do more of because it makes me. I can't remember the quote exactly what it is, but practicing that gratitude, writing down the things that I'm thankful for before my day even starts, it really gives me a perspective. So when I am faced with these difficult things, I look back on this is what I do have, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Beautiful to
Well,
get.
and I'm a total hypocrite. I mean, we all are, because it's one thing to voice the ideal and say this is the way of flourishing, this is the way of joy, but then after this I'm going to a congregant's house, and they're going to give me food, and in that moment I'm going to say, should I glut
Right.
we I don't know, it's just like I'm going to turn and I'm going to say, am I content, or should I eat a second helping of dessert?
Right.
And quite frankly, Bailey, at my age, no, I shouldn't.
One more question to wrap it up. This has been an awesome conversation. Something that I like to ask my guests with different backgrounds that they have, but kind of along the theme of the podcast of iron purpose and sharpening others. You're a pastor full time. You already mentioned all the stuff that goes on with that job and that role. You're a father. You're a husband. You have 6 children at home. What do you do to stay sharp? To stay on your A game, so that you are still able to help in all those capacities while also not pouring too much of your cup out. Is there
Hmm.
other things that you do that you focus on to do that, or is it?
Well, I have some serious answers and silly answers. What do you want to hear first?
Let's go with the silly. Give me the
Okay.
silly.
I golf. Not well, not often, but I golf. Um, I play Minecraft with my kids. I can tell you where the diamonds are. I mean, let's get it. So there's there's some life giving things that are helpful, but more pointedly, if you're asking the question, how can you stay vibrant in life and in faith? I'm fundamentally convinced of this one thing. It takes one thing. So simple. If you would wake up tomorrow and convince yourself that you are a desperate person, that you need God, you'll have all the vibrancy and all the faith you need. Because I'm sure you have experiences in your own life, Bailey, and others that are listening to this as well, where the times in which God has been most close to them, or maybe to say it more theologically correct, the times in which they've been most aware of God's presence is when they're desperate. God, my marriage is failing. I need you. God, this person I love is dying. I need you. God, I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. I need you to be a provider. God, there's this sin I keep going to again and again and again and again. Desperation is, I think, the key that unlocks a stable, mature, and vibrant life and faith. Waking up and saying, Jesus said in John 14, apart from me, you can do nothing. If I really believe that, the scriptures say that Jesus is the one who sustains this world. And if he sustains this world, then certainly he sustains a flawed individual like me. God, I wake up this morning and I need you to breathe. I need you to make it through the day as a responsible and diligent man. I need you to give me eyes and affection for my wife only. I need you to give me the energy to disciple and love and nurture my children. God, I need you to help me be patient when I don't want to be patient and I think this person's an idiot. I mean, so like, and so again, the key ingredient is a desperation. So, often, and a desperate spirit will produce a vibrancy and a humility that says, I can't, I'm not self sufficient, I'm not self made. To the wind, I don't give a rip about reputation. I don't care, Lord, about some of the things that I know will ultimately fail me. But if I wake up and I say, I need you, that's when I pray. That's when I read the word. That's when I fast. That's when I walk into Sunday with expectancy, saying, God, I'm feeling spiritually dry. Would you use something? A relationship, a song, something from your word? I need life again. And I think when we struggle the most is when we get to that spot of self sufficiency. We're like, you know what? I'm good. I'm okay. Things are comfortable right now. And when things are comfortable, we don't go to him. Proverbs 30 has this little prayer inserted that says, Lord, give me the food that is needful for me. Don't give me so much that I'd be fat and happy and not need you. And don't give me so little where I would be desperate and steal and profane your name and your way. So this prayer is, Lord, give me exactly what I need. And I need you. I need you for all things. So there's a lot of things that could be said. I'll add one more. In the book of Proverbs, there's this intimate relationship between, for the Christian, between the word of God and vibrancy. Oftentimes we fall into this trap of like, man, I just need extra. Before you popped on, I was listening to Forrest Frank. I just need, I need a little bounce. I need some kind of miracle. I need some kind of experience. I need some kind of vibe. And what the Word of God says, specifically Proverbs 7, saying, hey, son, hear up. If you would keep your teaching as the apple of my eye, it will protect you and guard you. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 3 that as we behold the glory of Christ, we're changed from one degree of glory to the next. So, in addition to being a desperate man, there's something about the Word of God that he says is sharper than any two-edged sword, pierces the heart, pierces the soul, transforms the mind, Romans 12. And oftentimes when I meet men, women, children who are struggling spiritually, it's often they've disconnected from seeing their desperate need and they've strayed from just trusting that if they read the Word of God, even in small bits, that it would serve them well and God will meet them and show up. I often tell my kids, I know what it's like to read the Bible and be bored. So plant that corn. Just plant and trust that over time something will grow, something will happen, and it's an act of faith, and that's what the Christian life is.
Mm, very well said. So you yourself have a podcast. Where can people find you if they want to tune in to what you got going on?
Well, brother, well, it's not much. I mean, it's not certainly not as good as yours. Yeah, so we have something here at Lakewood called the Pathway Podcast. Another pastor on staff, Jared and I, we talk about different things. We've done some controversial. We did Should We Speak in Tongues? What was one? What is free will? Most recently, we did one where we're explaining how we're going from 2 church services to 1, despite growth in numbers. So really, it's just aimed to serve people well, help them think about the scriptures. If anyone's really interested in being well served by Lakewood, it probably wouldn't happen on a podcast I do. But there's a body of imperfect believers here at Lakewood that would walk with people who have questions. I call it as John Bunyan did. He wrote the Pilgrim's Progress years ago. And the Christian journey, I often call the dangerous journey. And the dangerous journey takes friends. And there's a
Mm.
community here who would love and serve anyone who needed it. Come to the church. I don't know if the podcast has a lot to offer, but
Got both options there. I love that. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on here, man. This is an awesome episode. I've got plenty of notes, like I always do, and my cup is full after listening to you and speaking with you, Matt Nagel. Everybody, thank you so much again. It was a pleasure,
all right, brother, have a good one.
and you as well. Thank you, sir.